Here with Jim Wells, 2024 ABCA Hall of Fame inductee, but 15 years at Alabama, all-time winningest coach at Alabama, most SEC wins in that time period, 3 trips to the College World Series, and then tied for most SEC tournament wins with Skip Bertman and Paul Maneri, but assistant at LSU for Coach Bertman and head coach at Northwestern State. So Coach Wells, I said pre-call, you're one of my idols, so thanks for jumping on with me.
Well, Ryan, it's a pleasure, and I can't imagine why I would be one of your idols, but that's very nice of you to say.
Hey, after you got done playing, what were you doing before you took a grad job at LSU?
Well, I started off as a seventh grade teacher at Princeton Junior High, and then I got a job at Jesuit High School, Loyola, and the all-city team came out in '83, and I saw where LSU had hired a guy named Skip Bertman. And I said, I'd like to be a college coach. And anyway, and so I kept riding him. And 3 years later, he finally hired me. And I went to LSU and was a graduate assistant for 3 years and then got the Northwestern State job.
And you coached outfielders and hitters at LSU?
I did the outfielders and helped Beetle Bailey with the hitters, and what a wonderful experience. I mean,
Albert Bell was a good one to have, right?
I had Joe Bell. What's the funny
Joey.
story is I had Joey Bell when he was a kid on a summer league team in Shreveport and Bossier City. So I knew Joey. He was the only guy I knew, he and Terry. And Joe Bell was different. And back then with the bats, they do opposite drill off a machine, and he was the only guy that was hitting home runs opposite field and hitting most of them off. No one else could get it even to deep outfield. Back in those days, remember those days when people didn't do that? Yeah, Joe Bell.
Well, we talked about Evansville pre-call. I think that was the highest run total ever that LSU, Lyle Mouton was at LSU at the time, and Evansville went down to LSU and just got spanked. And my dad always tells that story as the bus is pulling out, they got the radio station on and they're giving Evansville a handful because Lyle Mouton just tore them to pieces.
Yeah.
Your first
never an easy place to play.
Yeah, tough. I like telling that story. They got there and my dad gets a knock on the hotel room door, and it's one of their pitchers. And he goes, "Hey, Coach Brownlee, some guys were wanting to go to the bookstore and get some LSU stuff." And so my dad was obviously not happy. Well, they're getting pounded in that game, and he brings that kid in out of the bullpen to pitch. He was so nervous he came out to pitch without a hat on. Came out to pitch without a hat on. My dad said I knew we were in trouble as soon as somebody's knocking on the door to see if they can go to LSU and get some bookstore stuff. Get some hats.
That's never good, is it?
That's not a good
never
sign.
Good.
Your first year at Northwestern State, you go 38-13, and that was the first winning season in 13 years. I mean, how did you get that going as quickly?
Well, I think that particular year, I was trying to get some wins because I didn't know if we were going to win a game. So played an easy schedule up front and accumulated a lot of wins, but then beat like USL. That was good. I don't know, Ryan. I think we worked so hard out of fear, and I was so excited. It would be great to still have that energy you did then. I thought I was, in coaching the Yankees. But, I mean, we worked hard. That was before there was rules, so God knows I think I'd practice them till it was dark because the president didn't want us using lights because I don't think the school had much money. So I just worked all the time, and I lost my voice one time in the year, and I gave them off a couple of days. I think those were the only 2 days they got off. I just think we outworked everybody. I don't think we did anything special. We just stayed out there a lot,
Was it tough for you to leave LSU? I know you played at Northwestern State, so you're kind of going back home there, but was it tough to leave LSU?
No, because I wanted to be a head coach. And I was with some guys that were perfectly happy being wearing that purple and gold and being a part of LSU. But I wanted to go somewhere and try it. I love my time at LSU, and I'm grateful that I got to stay there 3 years. But I was ready to go, and it wasn't like I was figuring the only job I really am going to get is or got chances back home because who knew you? And back then, no one got fired, and they didn't pay anything. And Coach Bourbon used to tell us, "You guys are better off getting your doctorate and trying to get a job at Harvard or Yale, or go be a manager at Piccadilly." And I was going, neither of those options sound very good. So thank God it all worked out.
What are some other things you learned from Coach Burtman?
Well, uh, I really, I kind of the basis of how you were going to program. He was different. I'd never been around a coach that was interested in all aspects of it because all I wanted to do was coach. All I wanted to do was hit ground balls, try and show how to pitch and hit. But he was into how you make money and how you can show that baseball can make money so ADs will pay attention to baseball. And he changed the game. I mean, he learned a lot from Frazier,
Yeah, he did.
but the entire program about how to run it. And so he was is interested. We every Monday he'd go out and speak, and I'd sell his book, and I'd get half of it. Because I remember I said, "Coach, I have a class on Monday," and he goes, "Well, you're not here to get a degree. I mean, come over here and help me." So I learned every aspect. There's not a day that goes by that I don't think of him in some regard. But the organization, the motivation. Um, I told him, I said, I've never met anybody as smart as you that was a coach. I mean, he could have been anything. On bus trips, he'd be reading the book on, Ray Kroc, how he got McDonald's going instead of reading Field and Stream. So, very intelligent man that by the time I got there, he was kind of interested in the whole picture because he knew they were going to be pretty good. And so he didn't come to practice every day in the fall because I said, "Where's the coach?" And they said, "It's too hot. He'll be out here when Ben McDonald has a pen." But I tell you what, when it came time to play, he knew what to do. And smartest man I've ever been around, for sure.
Did you switch your on-field duties when you got to Northwestern State then from what you were doing at LSU?
Yeah, I mean, back when I got to Northwestern, it was the old days. I mean, it was me, and I inherited the GAs that the previous coach had, and they were in class. So basically, I did the pitching. I had another man do the hitting, and but back then it was amazing. I don't know who that person was. I had energy enough to be involved in all aspects of it, and by the end, I was barely making it to the mound. But yeah, I was involved in all of it back then, but I had good help and some guys that went to Alabama with me. One of them in particular helped me with the pitching, and then Mike Bianco came and helped me for a couple of years, and he helped with the hitting. So back then we kind of all worked together. It was kind of like in '97 when one of my assistants came to me, Todd Butler, and he goes, "I need to be the hitting coach," and I was going, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, I need a title." And I think he was very smart because he knew we probably had a really good hitting team. So he became the hitting coach, and he was very good at it too. But back then, as you probably know, and your dad knows, you kind of did a little bit of everything, right? No one was designated, but I don't know if that answers your
What was
question.
that? Was that the most eye-opening thing? Probably going from LSU to Northwestern State is okay. How much work you're going to have to do to make it great?
Yeah. Yeah, and but again, I mean, it was so much fun, and I had so much energy that it didn't seem that way. But I mean, can you imagine? Just like any young coach, you would practice them all day, go eat dinner, and then come back up and work all night. And of calling people trying to convince somebody to come there, and no one really wanted to come there then. But started getting some good junior college guys. Figured out a deal where call the junior colleges that aren't at the top and get the best players from the, I hate to use worst junior colleges. They weren't being recruited, and we started getting those guys, and that plan kind of worked. And there's good players on bad teams, and that helped us. And then toward the end, we started getting a few guys out of the Midwest. Found out those guys in the Midwest, they would come just with a phone call because we had no money to bring them in, and they were just so happy. Yeah, it was warmer, and they had AstroTurf and Natchitoches, and yeah.
Did the Southland have an automatic bid back then?
You had to win the tournament.
That's what I thought.
Now, the first year, back before there was tournaments, the first year we won it, we got in, just went into the league. But the following years, it was had to win the tournament, and we never won the tournament. And so one year we won the league. We lost the tournament game to the last place team. And then the next year we lost it. But the coach at Skeeter, the guy at Sam Houston, he called me and he said, "Where would you like to go?" And I couldn't believe it. And I said, "Well, anywhere but Baton Rouge." And he sent us to Stillwater. So we got in without winning the league. So I think that was kind of a favor. Back then, I didn't know the dynamics of how anything worked. But
back then, the coaches were in charge of the regional selections back then. So my dad was on the regional selection committee for a long time for the Midwest. So it was more of a regionalized format back then. The old 8-team, 6-team regionals to see who went to Omaha, or the 6-team, 8 regionals to see who went to Omaha. Yeah. But my dad was on the Midwest regional selection committee. So it was the coaches that were picking the teams that were going back then. That's why you need to be nice to your opposing coaches back then, so guys wouldn't keep you out.
Well, that's how we got in. Yeah. I mean, you just taught me something, because I remember he says your RPI is this, and I didn't know what RPI was in 1994, and I said, okay, it sounds good to me.
What did Alabama look like before you got there? I mean, you had the most wins for a first-time head coach. I looked that up. It was 1907 was the last time a first-year head coach at Alabama had won that many games.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, that I think that was my favorite team, more so than the few that we had that went to Omaha. It was kind of like a team I was used to at Northwestern. There were no stars. There was no first-round draft picks that were gracing us with their presence. It was just regular guys. And kind of, used the same formula we did at Northwestern, just stayed out there forever. Then they passed this rule where you could only be 20 hours. That kind of went against the grain. Players enjoyed that, I'm sure. I just stayed out there. That was kind of my mode. That's not the best way, but that's all I knew. So
your numbers prove out that it works. As many games as you won, and in that league especially, like it proves that it works if you can keep them out there.
Yeah, if you can keep them out there. And we just not to be just so simplistic, but I mean, we just stayed out there all the time, and we hit, and we did defense, and we had meetings, and I talked to them every day. I learned from Coach Burtman the mental notes, go over the mental notes every day at practice, and you found out who wanted to play. And so we got down to the dirty dozen or whatever it was, but to this day, that was my favorite group.
1996, then you win the SEC title. It was Alabama's first since 1983, and first regular season title since '68. I mean, and you have the most title wins tied with Coach Burtman and Moneri. What is the key to winning that tournament? Because that is a tough tournament to win with the amount of teams playing that tournament.
Yeah, I wish I could be specific. It helped that we were playing in Birmingham, I think. Got a little momentum. I think One thing that we did that I look back and I was going, how in the world did we come up with that? I would throw my reliever the first game. Hadn't pitched but one or two or three innings the whole year. I would throw him the first game, which would give the normal guys an extra day's rest. And just by uh, God's grace or whatever, that guy always would do well, and then it would set up our rotation. And then we got momentum where guys had never pitched. But back then you would say, "Hey, listen, we're playing in Hoover. Throw it down the middle. Don't try and be because they can't hit it out." Back before the bats got too crazy, right? So these guys that threw 82 to 85, they were giving up ball. Our park, a lot of home runs, but at Hoover, we're hitting fly balls to the warning track, and I look back and we were just very fortunate. We had guys that never pitched that came through and pitched great at the end. And then I think there for a while we thought we were going to win, and I'm sure that helped, with the thinking. And but that was an amazing run, and we had awfully good players too there for several years. I mean,
I was at the 1997 World Series, by the way. I worked the Yes Clinic for the NCAA that they used to run the first weekend where coaches, I went with my dad, my college roommate, to work that camp. But we saw those first round of games, and I love telling the Roberto Vaz story because I think he was maybe the SEC Player of the Year, but you guys broke his leg in the dog pile, and so he's out getting the bats for you guys with a broken leg during the World Series.
And yeah, the best player I've ever been around. He was taking BP right before the regional final against USC, and they had put the lime on the lines, and there was a brand new white baseball right on the line. He didn't see it, and he was an excitable player, and I'm sure he finished off his BP round with a home run, and he stepped on the ball and broke his foot. And yeah,
do you guys win the national championship if you have him? I mean, you're a runner-up that year. Do you win it?
Yeah,
Does he make a difference?
I never thought about that till I went. After I left Alabama, there's a junior college down the road, East Mississippi, not far from the house, and I'd go over there and help them. And I remember the head coach says, Coach, and I never had thought that. But in head-to-head competition, we had played LSU pretty good that year, and the players believed that. As a coach, you hesitate to say that, but we'd beaten them 2 out of 3. Had beaten them in the SEC tournament. We were more talented than they were. They were awfully good, but they might have had a little more pitching depth. But Vaz was like losing, I don't know. I just watched a special on Detroit Lions and Barry Sanders. It was like we lost your main guy there.
There's a lot of history in that 97 field, too, because Tim Hudson was at Auburn. Lance Berkman was at Rice. It was Ron Polk's last year at Mississippi State. Obviously, what LSU did, that whole field, UCLA was in it. They had a bunch of big leaguers. Every team in that field that year was almost like this year's College World Series with the amount of big leaguers that were on the field. Everybody in that field in 97 had big leaguers. Cal Peterson was at Stanford, so that field in 97 was really good. Really good.
Was really in Miami. Had that Pat Burleson
Pat Burrell.
He was huge. Pat Burrell and Burrell, and then I remember watching UCLA practice, and they had the shortstop that was like 6'5". They had 2 first rounders. Troy Gloss, and then they had a left-handed pitcher.
Jim Parquet.
There you go.
I played against those guys in the Cape League, so I kind of knew those guys. Back then there's no social media, so you don't really know who anybody is unless you had played against them. And I actually like that generation better because you didn't know who anybody was.
I like that generation. I like that too. There's too much information out there. Like Coach Berman used to say, with the scouting reports, he says it gets to a point where there's just too much info. Do we really need to know what the guy looks at in a 2-2 count on a windy day, wind out of the southwest with just I like the old days where all you had was the stats, and you go in. Obviously, this guy throws strikes. He comes right at you. He's very hittable, but you're gonna have to swing the bat and yeah. At the end, I don't know what they do now. I guess you know better than me, Ryan. They
It's all
even in
video
Northwest,
now. It's
yeah,
synergy. It
analytics.
makes it easier now though, because you can actually watch guys. Where if you want to spend enough time breaking guys down, you can do that because you can see every at bat and every pitch that they've thrown or been on. So it's a little better visually because you can actually see them in action. And the scouting reports, the hard copy scouting reports in the old days weren't always good unless they were your own. Where
Right.
I think this generation, if you want to spend enough time doing it, you can break guys down. I mean, you're a good baseball guy. If you watch a hitter for five at bats, you're going to probably be able to figure out how to get them out.
Yeah. Yeah. I obviously that is an advantage, and because even when everyone was shifting, I asked Bobby Barbier at Northwestern. I said, "Do you do that?" He says, "Oh yeah, we got that whatever it is." I'm going, it's unbelievable,
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Do you like the format of the SEC tournament and the field of 64 now?
Do I like the format of the SEC tournament and the field of 64 now? Okay, help me understand that question. You talking about
Well,
it
because
as a
the
whole?
SEC has added more teams. I'm talking
Yeah,
about the tournament. I think the SEC has done a good job because almost everybody gets to go play in that tournament, especially in that
yeah,
league where it does matter for RPI.
yeah, yeah.
Where I mean, you look at
No,
what
I see what
Ole
you're
Miss
saying. Yeah,
did. Some of the last
yeah.
teams got in because of that, and then now with the field of 64, I really
Yeah.
like the best 2 out of 3 series. And again, that was a one and done for the '97 World Series, where maybe if it's a best 2 out of 3, maybe you guys win that thing because you maybe beat LSU 2 out of 3 games because you played well against them all year.
No, I agree. I do like the format the way it is now. And back in the day when I can't remember where they were taking when we first got in 6 teams and then 8 teams. Coaches, the coaches in the SEC, it became like a fraternity, and it seemed like they wanted more teams in because ads would fire you if you didn't make the SEC tournament, more so than not doing well in a regional or not even making a regional back then. And so everyone fought for that. And I think the ACC, did they not? They were the first, weren't they,
They
putting
expanded.
everybody in? Yeah. So yeah, it's a good thing for the coaches. It's a good thing uh, for baseball. So yes, I do agree with you.
What's going into the ABCA Hall of Fame mean to you?
Well, first of all, I can't believe that I'm going in because I mean, Hall of Fame to me is Mickey Mantle, Sandy Koufax, Rod Dedeaux, Skip Bourbon. We had a few good years, but I don't see my record or time as Hall of Fame worthy. So I'm very, I feel blessed to go in. It's a big deal because, I went to that thing for years. When I was a junior high coach, I would go to that meeting. I still have the notes somewhere. I kept all the notebooks. I'd go to every one of them. And I mean, I'm coaching 7th grade, and I'm going to San Francisco to listen to all these speakers in Dallas and Nashville and Atlanta, wherever it was. So it was a big deal to me. I always wanted to speak at that, and I'd put my name in at Northwestern, and no one. But when I got to Alabama, they asked me to speak. I never spoke in front of so many people in all my life. Thank God I'd memorized that thing because if I'd have been off the cuff, I would have bombed. But it's a big deal, and it's a big deal, mainly to my family. I think they're going to get a kick out of it, and my kids, because a couple of my kids were when I got out of coaching. My son was 9, so he really doesn't even know I coached. So, uh, So my good friend Andy Lopez told me that, because I was telling him the same thing. I said, "What? I can't believe this. What they must be running out of names." And he goes, it's going to be a good deal for your kids to see and to get up there. And so, yes, I'm very proud of it. But and you know,
I love that we're
but
introducing maybe some names to the newer generation of coaches that don't. I feel like I kind of bridge the gap because I'm 49, and so I feel like I
yeah,
kind of bridge the gap to the old days because my dad. So I know the names from the 60s and 70s, was around in the 80s and 90s, and now I love the fact that we're introducing Titans the game, that names that maybe people don't pay attention to that will know now, because I know how good you are. Like, you don't give yourself enough credit. You're really humble, and like, you should give yourself more credit for what you've done over the course of your career, because when you look at the numbers, like, no, there's not very many people that can say they did what you did in the game.
yeah. Well, you're very kind, and thank you for those words. But it's hard to think that way. It's like when I don't know about you, but you know, you you think about the things that went wrong more than the things that went right. Isn't that kind of the mentality of a coach? You'd win a game and you're breaking down what went wrong. Especially when you have a good team because they can respond to it. Doesn't help when you don't have a good team. That just makes things worse. So, but anyway, yeah, I'm incredibly uh, happy about all this going on, and I just hope when I get up there, when they said the speech 5 minutes, I went, oh, praise God, because if they asked me to speak 20 minutes, I wouldn't know what to do.
Well, that's for length of time, and that's why I started these podcasts too, is to give people a chance to dive in a little bit more, and maybe give some people some shout outs too that you may not get to too, just because we all stand on the shoulders of other people to get to where we're at. And so we've all gotten to positions because of the help of other people. So it's always nice to be able to give people shout outs and just in general, give people shout outs.
That's right. No, you're so right. And I was thinking last night because you come up with ideas of things to say, and every single position I ever got was directly due to one or two people, or maybe more, helping me get that. You know, there's nothing I did on my own. To get a job. I mean, somebody helped me along the way, and it's so true. Because when you're young, you think, man, I'm pretty good. I'm doing this. I'm a self-made. I come on. We all got here because of somebody's help and just some good luck.
So was it the convention the reason why you wanted to get into college coaching?
Well, it's kind of like when you start off in the seventh grade coaching football, basketball, track, and baseball. I just had a desire to go as far as I could. It was just I don't think it was a convention. It was just that I just wanted to. I just was obsessed with. I loved it. I'd sit at home. With the TV on, and I'm reading some book on baseball drill books. Getting new drill. And back then, there wasn't a whole lot of information. I even got the Ted Williams video on. He made a video for Sears, and I had to call Sears national office in Chicago. They said, "Well, we don't know where it is, but if we find it, we'll send it to you." And they sent me that, and I broke it down in slow motion. So, yeah, I was eating up with it there for a while. That was pretty much everything to me.
We had a videotape of just Rod Carew hitting. There was no explanation. I would throw that VHS tape. It was just a half-hour video of Rod Carew taking swings, like no narrative, nothing. It just was him hitting.
Beautiful. The first camp I ever went to was Gary Ward. Never heard of a baseball camp.
Saw his video
And
every year in high school.
oh, and it was I'm teaching high school, and it was in my mail. It had Mid America. I said, "What's this?" So I took Joe and Terry Bell, my summer league team, and I went up there and I got to know him, and he would let but what he did made me think of it is he got permission from the Cardinals, and he videoed Keith Hernandez. I'm sure he did others. and he put it in slow motion. He says that's how he developed his hitting. Uh, and so, of course, I started taping games and then taping them in slow motion. And, I didn't know what I was looking at half the time, but it reminded me when you said Rod Carew. You didn't need any narrative. You just listen to him, just watch him.
I tell coaches this a lot in camp settings or when I speak. This is the greatest time to be a coach, to be able to break video down. It's so much easier now to break video down than it was back in the old days. You're using the mini VHS tape to go into a converter in the VHS to be able to watch. At JMU, each of our players had their own little video cassette recorder that you'd film, and then if you wanted to break it down, you had to put it in the converter and then break it down. And now it's get your phone out and video it, and then you can show somebody right away. That's a lot easier.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, there's a lot of information with that. You can overload people now because it is instant access. But the amount of time that all of us coaches back in the old days did to try to help with player development, luckily at Evansville when we did it, the baseball offices were right next to football offices, and they had the cowboy collar that you could take the dial and go forward and back with it. So that made it a little bit easier, but it's amazing to think how far the game has come from just everything from when we all started.
Yeah. And you're like a bridge, like you said, because you've seen it all.
Yeah.
See, my bridge, it ended 20 years ago, but I mean, I hear these stories, but you've actually seen and done what they're doing now. Yeah, it's a different ball game, isn't it, Ryan?
Oh, it's just in a good way. I mean, I know we've got a ways to go now with everything that's going on with NIL, and we'll get that squared away. It's going to happen, but it's amazing to think of where it started and where it is now.
Yeah, yeah. What is that NIL all about?
I don't even think the NCAA doesn't know either. It's the wild, wild west right now.
It is.
I mean, that's crazy to me.
I can't imagine, when you're trying to negotiate a scholarship, whether to give them books or not. And now people are talking about thousands, tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars for a 3-hole hitting third baseman. And I don't know.
But you play the hand that you're dealt.
Yeah.
Every generation of coaches has had to deal with something. And over time, the next generation is going to have to deal with something different. And so you just, as a coach, I think that's the great thing with baseball coaches is they're really good at playing the hand that they're dealt.
No, you're right. You're right.
I mean, because you could have made excuses at Northwestern State. I mean, you could have made excuses. You didn't make excuses. As a competitor, I don't think you can make excuses.
No, you're right. I mean, things are always evolving, and that's just the way it is now. And if we were in the middle of it, or I was in, you adjust and go on. But from the outside looking in, it seems stranger than it actually is if you're doing it.
Yeah. Do you have a fail forward moment? Do you have something you thought was going to set you back, but looking back now, it helped you move forward?
Something that set me back in life.
Well, anything. Life path. Everybody has to answer this one. This is the one common question that everybody, because we've gotten some really great answers from this, and the listeners really like the answers. And for me, it's like something at the time maybe you thought it was going to set you back, but looking back now, it actually helped you move forward.
Well, I tell you what, it's kind of like I heard Johnny Bench say when he was watching Mickey Mantle on TV and found out he was from Oklahoma, and he turned to his dad and he said, "Can people from Oklahoma play in the big leagues?" And he goes, "Yeah." So, I mean, you're under the impression when you're from Bossier City, Louisiana, that, there's that thought process that how am I going to make it when, you viewed others not better than you, but in a position to do more than you. And not having been a good player and being in the 7th grade, there were times of doubt where you said, am I really going to be able to, coach at an LSU and that's why I went for Northwestern because at the time I said, that's about as good as it's going to get for me. If I don't get this job, I'm going to be back at Princeton Junior High. And because, I mean, my wife's from that town. So I figured, I got a shot. But I don't know if that makes any sense. But that was the fact that, you can make it and you don't have to be a great player and you don't have to have, I didn't really have anything other than it certainly helped that I worked at LSU. That helped the resume. And we got to work with Coach Bertman. That was a big help. And without that, probably the career would have stalled, but that certainly helped.
Who instilled your love of baseball?
I don't know. I just, my parents really weren't into sports too much. They did because of me, but I don't know. I loved all the sports, but baseball gave you the opportunity to coach because you're off in the summers. So I kind of fell into it. My father was an attorney, and I guess I was supposed to do that. I took the test to do it, and I didn't really want to do it. And a guy asked me one day to coach, would I like to coach a summer league team? And I remember my first question was, do they have any good players? And he goes, yeah, a guy named Bill Pittman. So I said, yeah, I'll do it. My father wasn't too crazy about that idea, but I said, Dad, I tell you what, let me try this for a year, and if it doesn't work out, I'll do the law school bit. And I got a job coaching seventh grade, and I just loved it. And so baseball was because that was the only sport when you're in college you could coach. I guess if basketball or football had been there, maybe you do that. But baseball was the one that kind of fell in my lap.
How did you know it was time to step away?
When I started looking at my watch, my whole deal, Ryan,
Because not
was,
too many. I give you credit because I mean you're still in a great position. You guys were still rolling, and I don't think there's many guys that can do that. I think you see a lot of guys just kind of hold on. But I give you a lot of credit for making that type of decision because I think a lot of guys hold on to it if their heart's not in it, or and I'm not saying your heart wasn't in it, but I think for you personally, and maybe I'm wrong on that, better than I because you're in it. I was just intrigued that how you knew it was okay, it was time.
yeah, yeah. No, you're right. I tell you what, it started entering my head because my whole deal was giving more effort. Because I felt that's how to overcome other things. You just got to work harder than the other guy. And I think, I went to see Andy Lopez became a dear friend, is a dear friend. And I went to see him in Gainesville one time because I was starting to feel it. I was getting and feeling guilty because I didn't want to stay out there from dawn to dusk. And he goes, well, no wonder. He says, I've never practiced more than 2 hours and 30 minutes. He goes, you're just now getting started at 2 hours and 30 minutes. But I think not to use that term because it's overused, but I would read all about all those guys. Dick Vermeil. I remember I was intrigued with anyone that got out of coaching early. Ara Parsegian, Jim Leland before he got back in. Because I was thinking it a few years before I did it. And honestly, they were paying you so much, or back then, you start off at 50,000 and you're getting like 250,000, and you got kids. So, I probably hung on a couple of years I shouldn't have, but I just didn't. That's why I enjoyed that Barry Sanders deal last night. They kept wanting to. The
Another
whole
good
deal
example
was
of another good at the pinnacle guy for his own purposes, which is exactly right. Now, it gave you a chance to be with your kids, which a lot of coaches, I didn't have that opportunity. My kids were old when I finished. That's got to be a huge benefit to doing that at that point.
It is. It is. My son was 9 years old, and he really is like my best friend. And because I didn't get to spend the time with the others, so he's still here. He's in his last year of college, but if anything, we've spent a lot of time together.
I'm trying to make up for it now. Now that with my job now, my son's 20, my daughter's 18, so I'm trying to make up for the time that I lost.
You can do it.
Yeah,
you can do
sure.
it.
Yep.
You and Yeah, because my first daughter is 34. I didn't, she today will say, Dad, you weren't at the state track meet. Well, we were in the SEC tournament. But I got, but they understood because the other thing is they loved that life. They loved the travel. They loved going to the game. So it was just a trade off. But
My mom apologizes to me all the time about all the stuff we didn't get to do, but I remind her, I'm like, my classmates were jealous of me because I was able to go on the bus and hang out with college players, and so I actually thought it was a great thing. And
yeah,
I think as a parent, you're always going to have guilt about your children on certain things, but I always remind my mom, I'm like, no, like I had it better. Like my classmates were jealous of what I was getting to do.
oh, I'd be jealous of you too. That that's pretty cool life. Plus, think about what you were exposed to at a young age with your dad. I mean, you're seeing things that some people don't get till way
Never
later in
get to
life.
experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
What are some other shout outs before I let you go?
Uh, well, I mentioned Skip Bertman, Andy Lopez. Those are big ones. Like in the talk, thank all the players. How do you thank all the people? What do people do at these speeches? You can't name all these people, can you? Do you know what you do? But I'm thankful, really, when you look. It's like Gary Ward called me one time. It was so Todd Butler got the job, and he goes, Jim, I got an offer for you. I said, yes, sir. What's that? He says, hire my son to replace Butler, and I'll come be the volunteer coach. And I'm like, and then he goes, because it's all about family, Jim. It's all about family. And there you get caught up, and that's it. I mean, here we are. You got a couple of close friends, if you're lucky, two or three, and your family. So, um, you appreciate that more as you get older. I don't think that's the case when you're trying to make it, but once you're done, you look back and you're thankful for them, and because they're really it. Those are the ones that care the most. So I want to make sure I don't forget to thank them at the convention.
Thanks for your time, Coach Wells, man. Like I said, this was I was looking forward to this just because you're right
Well,
in my
thank you
sweet
so
spot
much.
playing. And enjoy the
Yeah,
time in Dallas, man. You're gonna love it. You're gonna have a great time.
yeah, I haven't been there. I
Hopefully
haven't
it's
been there
memorable
since
for you.
'96. Yeah. Well, Ryan, thank you so much. You're very kind. Look forward to seeing you down the road one day again.
And tell Drew thanks again for getting the computer lined up. So all
I
right,
will, or we'd have never done this.
appreciate you, sir.
All right, man. Thank you.